I didn't. That's okay. Jake in Illinois. You're talking to Eric and Darrel. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. Doing well. Doing well. How are you, Darrel?
I'm doing super darn good. Right.
Oh, good.
Super darn good.
What do you want to talk about,
Right.
man? What would you like to talk about, my friend?
I wanted to ask you if you knew of any civilizations or empires in world history that were started by atheists.
Why?
Yeah. What's the relevance here? I know lots of them started by Hindus and Buddhists. Would that be okay? Buddhists can be atheists.
Fundamentalists, radicals. You also have nations that are started by empires reaching out and setting up colonies. A lot of European empires established nations.
Yeah, the Catholics were pretty nasty when they set up their empire in South America and killed about 80 to 90% of all the population. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, my point is that atheism has no unifying factor. People can't really unite with atheism, so it's kind of like...
Well, of course not. It's just the answer to one question. It's just right. Does a God exist? I don't have the evidence to support that, so I'm going to go with no until I see the evidence. That has nothing to do with, secular humanism and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, that wasn't my question, though, was it?
So you said atheism has nothing to unite under. People can't unite.
My question was, do you know of any civilizations or empires where the founding stock or the founding people were atheists?
No.
I never even thought about why. It's not a political ideology. You can be a Republican and atheist. You can be a communist and atheist. You can be a Buddhist and atheist. I don't understand how that's relevant to starting any civilization.
Well, it is relevant because to start an empire, start a civilization. Have you ever heard of an essay by John Glubb?
No.
He wrote about a 30-page essay on the fate of empires.
John Glubb.
He noticed about
Was he the author of the autobiography of Muhammad?
I don't know.
I think he was. I think it's the same author. But yeah, go ahead.
So I guess what he noticed is he studied 10 different empires and noticed there were similarities between all of those empires. And one of the symptoms at the end was a lack of religion. Some other symptoms were mass immigration, a lack of a sense of duty, pessimism, and atheism just seems to be tied in at the end of all these empires. So it seems like atheism is kind of like a weakening of the a culture or empire where it falls apart and basically results in the people becoming...
Can I ask you a clarifying question, Jake?
Sure.
So in this, let's just say I grant all of that, which I don't, but for the sake of argument, I do, right? Does any of that information make it more likely that God exists?
I guess it's hard to say because we don't have anything to... We have one world and one history, so it's kind of hard to tell whether something makes it more likely or less likely because we have nothing to compare this world to.
Well, I can imagine I can give you a thought experiment where I go and
we don't have two different timelines.
Well, this is true.
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, that's okay. I know there's a bit of a delay, so that's all right, my man. I can imagine a world where I go to a uninhabited land and I decided that I'm going to create a new country called Ericlandia, right? And it becomes successful, and 1,000 years later, people look back. Would my establishment of that country mean anything about religion? Would it point toward the truth value of one God over another?
Well, it would if you could study hundreds of different countries, and all of the ones that were successful had a religion, and all the ones that were not successful there was no successful one without a religion. So it means atheism is inherently weak as an ideology.
Well, that's because atheism is not an ideology. Why would it? Why are you claiming it has a weakness that it doesn't even claim to have to begin with? It's not an ideology.
Right. It's the lack.
It's an answer to one single
belief and a higher.
It's answer to one single question. That's all it is. If you want an ideology, go somewhere else. Humanism could be considered an ideology. Atheism is not an ideology. Now, are you familiar with the cargo cults?
Are
you familiar with the
term? But I'm not sure of it.
Well, those are religions just sprung up pretty much spontaneously at the end of World War II, and they still exist today. And they are still waiting for the Americans to come back with all their airplanes, and they built airports awaiting the planes to come back and bring all sorts of wonderful material things to them. And John Frum is their God, or the Jesus, and he's going to come back. It's amazing to watch religions spring up spontaneously. They do that. Christianity, Hinduism, all those religions pretty much sprung up spontaneously. I have no idea why that has any relevance to your question.
That's pretty debatable.
I'm just wondering what the relevance is to a God existing on this argument.
Well,
because I mean, something can be weak and true. Something could be strong and false, right?
Right.
I can force everybody to believe a religion that I make up off the top of my head if I'm pointing a gun at their face, and
So if you
have them teach their children.
Can't answer my question that there is no empire or civilization that could be started where the people are atheists, that wouldn't that make sense that even if there was no God, which I believe there is a God, but even if there wasn't, it would still make sense to have a religion, so you would have a strong empire or have a strong country with successful people?
No.
So you would rather...
I would rather us not create in-group, out-group dynamics. I would rather us not shrink the size of our tribe and then justify violence because of that religion. We can create a civil society, and I absolutely advocate creating a civil society, but I do not advocate creating these in-group, out-groups.
That was just my argument. You cannot create a civil society.
Okay, where's your evidence?
I just asked you for the evidence.
No, you asked for...
There is no...
No.
Yeah, there
Jake,
is no country.
Jake, you need to understand what evidence is. You need to understand what evidence is. So you can make fun of the other side all you want, but you actually need to bring something to the table yourself to present it.
Yes.
So what is your evidence that your God exists?
Evidence. That wasn't my argument.
Do you care?
Well, yes, I do care. But
okay, why do you think your God exists?
Here.
That's because that's what this show does. Here. No, I don't give a fuck about your question. This is the show where people say, "Hey, this is why I believe," and we talk about whether or not you believe. So, why do you believe?
So basically, you have. All right, so before we move on to that, you have to admit that you can't provide an answer to my question.
I just told you I can't think of any, and we gave you examples of...
Okay.
So
I've been to Sweden many times, and almost everybody there is an atheist. Now, they're not activists because they don't need to be. Sweden seems to be doing pretty damn well. Denmark, I've been to Denmark many times. I would say 80% of the people there are probably functional atheists. They certainly don't go to church or have any crosses in there. So they're doing pretty darn well.
But how long has that been the case?
But
where they've been majority atheists?
How is this relevant?
So
though?
It's only been a few decades.
No,
so what's happening now?
I'm asking about the relevance
now in Sweden.
Jake, do you care about whether or not that God is real, or are you talking about whether or not it's important that okay, if you believe that God is real,
I was calling in
to argue about
I was calling in
geopolitics and religiosity based on their founding?
Well, yeah, of course, because if God is real, then everything has to do with God. So you could see God.
Okay.
Okay.
So now we're tying in.
Happening?
How does that count? How does that point toward the existence of God?
Well, the more you research, the more you delve into it, the more you see that, okay, God is probably real.
How so? I'm asking you to give that evidence.
Well, let's use your example, all right?
Okay.
What's happening in Sweden now?
Well, let me ask, which God is real? Is it the Mormon God or the Muslim God?
Neither.
Is it Thor?
Thor sounds pretty real. They used to use him in Sweden, I think.
I mean, we named the days of the week after those gods.
Yeah, right.
Is it those?
Of course. Yeah, Thor is Thursday, I think.
Yeah.
Isn't he?
Yeah. So, again, though, even if I were to show you that those are related, that has nothing to do with whether or not that God exists. How do you know that your God exists?
Right. Well, that is a matter of faith.
Okay.
And
what is
you guys
faith?
don't like that. So that's...
No, hold on. Let's see if we have the same definition. Let's see if we have we might agree. What's your definition of faith?
Faith is belief without concrete evidence.
Okay. Why is faith useful?
Well, obviously, it builds civilizations and empires.
No, you didn't. You actually need to provide evidence. Try again. I can build
evidence is every civilization and empire in world history. Where's yours?
Okay, again, I can lie. We agreed. We gave you examples of cargo cults where people started nations and started countries and are in countries, and give you examples of current countries where people don't believe what you believe and those countries are still there.
Right. And
so how is that evidence in your favor, Jake?
Because obviously, if there was a God, then how would it make sense if you would allow atheists to build an empire? It obviously looks like he's not allowing that.
Okay, so you're not even talking about the existence. You're talking about the nature of that God and what that God would and would want and wouldn't want. If God is real, then we can have that talk. If God is real, then we could have the talk about the nature of that God. Show that God exists in the first place.
Well, I have to use the real world because that's what we
Okay, point to the real world. And if you point towards civilizations, I'm hanging up. Try again. Give me actual evidence instead of pulling stuff out of your butt.
Argument was.
It's a bad argument.
Try again. A really bad argument. And I just want to go back and say the author I thought you were talking about is not the same person. I don't want to defame the good guy because he wrote a great biography of Muhammad. Just remember, Muhammad started an entire civilization that's the second largest in the world right now. And you don't seem to think that's a valid civilization.
No, it appears that he thinks...
I do admit it is a religion, although I don't believe it's the best one.
Right. You have no evidence to justify yours over his, over Hinduism, over Buddhism, over Scientology, over Mormonism. They all make the same claim you're making right now.
And also, it doesn't matter. They can all be successful and there still be no God.
Right.
You cannot point toward the success of a country and say, it is because and is evidence of a God existing. That's how.
Well, there is difference in morality, though.
Oh, you want to talk? So who's moving the goalposts now?
Yeah, you keep moving the goalposts.
Yeah, let's actually go back here, right?
Well, you guys said if I talk about my original argument, then you will hang up. Well, so I have to move the goalposts.
Because it's a bad argument. Do you get that it's a bad argument?
Well,
yes or no?
What? Define the argument again.
So I said I'm going to hang up on you if you point towards the existence of societies as evidence for your God, because we gave you a bunch of examples, and your response was because of the existence of societies, which tells us that you weren't listening. And if you're going to continue... Yes, we did. Darrel, how many examples did you give?
I don't know how many examples you need, but you don't seem to know anthropology very well, and you're not a sociologist. You're not using real-world examples. You always go back to your fantasy about your God. So
we talked about cargo cults, right? You talked about Norse society. You talked about Sweden. You talked about Denmark, Islam. How many of those examples?
What's happening in Sweden now?
How many? Jake.
Muslims because
Jake. Do you get that I don't care? And I told you why. So let me spell it out again. Maybe you can get it. Ready?
Right.
Are you ready? Because this is important. Are you ready? Hold on. Are we ready?
Oh, are you going to hang up now?
No.
Yeah, I'm ready for you to hang up.
You called Talk Heathen. Here's why. It doesn't matter whether or not a society survives or not, because that does not necessarily point toward the existence of a God. You can have a successful society that doesn't point toward the existence of a God, and in societies where people do believe in gods, they believe in ones that you don't believe in, and still you seem to be taking credit for them. So that is why we gave you these examples, because we're giving you, hey, here are other examples of other religions. Hey, even if there were no religions, that still wouldn't point toward the existence of a God. I don't care what's currently going on in a country if it doesn't matter. You actually need to show that it matters. Do you get why I'm getting so frustrated? Because you're saying the existence of societies points towards the existence of God. And I'm saying, show it. And you're saying the existence of societies. And you said, what's your evidence? And we gave you a bunch of examples. And you said, well, it's the existence of societies. And then, so I said, Jake, if you continue on this line, it's telling us that you are not listening. And if you're going to continue that instead of engaging or listening, I'm going to hang up on you. So do you get why that's so important?
Yeah, you think the existence of a society and a successful one does not necessarily mean that God exists. I get that.
No, that's not what we said at all.
Well,
that's not.
Go ahead.
Well, we're two different people. I'm actually saying that.
Okay, go for it.
Because the existence of a society, and Darrel gave you examples of societies that exist, that are, and my piece is actually different from yours, because I don't think it matters.
No, I don't think it matters either. I'm just saying it's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant.
Yeah, it felt like a rabbit trail.
But right. I would suggest this. I don't know this author you read, but a 30-page article ain't gonna make a very good argument. I would go read Jared Diamond's book on collapse. He's got a much better assessment of why civilizations collapse. And almost always, in fact, maybe always.
How do you know it's much better if you haven't read John Glubb?
Because 30 pages ain't going to do shit. There's a whole lot of other reasons out there, and the main thing is environmental degradation is almost always the cause. Whether it's a Maya Empire, Egyptian Empire, Eastern European Empire, it doesn't matter.
Wait, you're saying environmental degradation?
That's almost always the reason why an environment collapses.
This is above my pay grade.
Come on.
Yeah, it's. I'm just suggesting go read something that has real science to it. Your Glubb guy doesn't have any science if he's got a Jesus or a God in his argument. That's all I'm saying. Get rid of Jesus and God and look at the real science.
And so
he actually doesn't mention his religion in the essay at all.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't even know if he has the same religion I do.
Okay. So
making assumptions.
That was snarky. I like you, Jake. So, Jake, back on my point, you actually parroted what I said very well, which means that you are actively listening, and I appreciate that. Thank you. So, the existence of society does not necessarily point toward the existence of a God. And so that's why I'm saying it's a weak argument. I'm giving you my reasoning. I'm not just stating out, well, this is, what I feel. No, because of the examples that we gave, it's not a reliable argument to make. So my question is either back it up or...
It's a reasonable argument if your argument is that you need a religion to have a civil society, because we have world history to look back on. If that's the argument. But if the argument's about if God exists, then I agree, you're right, it doesn't prove that God exists just because you have a great civilization.
Okay.
But if our argument is you need a religion to have a great civilization, then it's important.
So then if you follow the noble lie, do you think we should believe untrue things just because it takes us to a better result? Like, let's say I granted that premise. Do you think that we should believe something that's not true just because we get the result we want somewhere else?
No.
Okay. So why would you argue for the existence of or the creation of societies because you think religion is necessary to it starting, if you think that whether or not it's true is more important?
Well, I think it might say something about whether or not it is actually true. Because I think we're here for a reason.
Okay.
Well, there's another supernatural notion, eh?
If you think about us being here for no reason.
Hey, Jake, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you we had a donation come in. It's specifically saying thank you for this call. In the live chat, people are appreciative of it, talking about how we build empires. So, cheers.
Oh.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I know. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call.
So
you guys were actually this show was actually I grew up as Catholic, and this show made me become atheist for 4 years. So you guys had some good points.
Well, you must be talking about the other show because we didn't go back in time.
Oh, yeah, your related show with Matt Dillahunty.
Our big sister show, yeah. You know what? The important thing is that we're using the best tools we have at our disposal to be able to apply everywhere we can. And so that's why it matters that we're using those tools and we're using them for the right reasons. Right. And so when we're talking about the existence of societies, you and I both agreed that it doesn't matter whether or not a society is formed around something that's untrue, because we don't want to use untrue things to convince people to do things we want them to do. We'd rather them make educated decisions based on the evidence at hand. And so that takes us back to the question. It seems like you said that you believe in a God, and based on the fact that you're speaking English and are in Illinois, I'm going to assume that's a Christian God, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad we covered that, and so I'm no longer assuming. Why do you believe that the Christian God is there?
Well, when I guess I'll summarize like my research that I've done over the years is I became atheist and I started researching, like I became a militant atheist for years. I talked to people and...
What does that mean?
What's a militant atheist?
Yeah, I might be a militant.
You might be.
It's like it's a term like you constantly argue with people about religion from the atheist perspective.
So
I didn't intend for it to be a negative term. I was just as a descriptive term.
No, I'm just wanting to find out whether or not I fit in that term. I guess I'm a militant atheist.
Because you're on the show.
Yeah.
Yep, you are.
Okay.
There you go.
That's fine.
I didn't intend for it to be an insult or anything.
No worries, brother. I think it's fun. I just wanted to see that we were on the same page. So, Jake, you said that you were an atheist for a while. You know, I do want you to know where I'm coming from for this, because where I'm coming from, I've met a lot of atheists who believe in crystal healing and chakras and spiritual whatevers and tapping into the collective unconscious because the quantum. And because of that, I'm really not convinced when somebody says they were an atheist, because holy crap, we come in a lot of flavors.
I perfectly understood where you're coming from. Like, you don't believe in ghosts, you don't believe in crystal healing, or
right.
I mean, I'm with you there. That's pretty much nonsense.
Right. Even Holy Ghosts.
Yeah.
You are so...
No, I disagree.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
I don't believe in Holy Ghosts.
I'd love you, Darrel.
I would like to throw one thing in about because I think we may have a terminology issue here. I think civilizations oftentimes do well when they have an organizing ideology. I don't know that they have to, but I think they do better if they have an organizing ideology. That could be an insidious organizing ideology, and I think Catholicism was an insidious organizing ideology, just like Catholicism was communism was an insidious organizing ideology that led to the deaths of millions of people in South America and Eastern Russia and other things. Nazism was an insidious organizing ideology.
Murdering people.
So there's a number of ideologies that organize societies, but just because it's helping to organize doesn't mean it's a good thing. I don't think any of us would agree.
Yeah, I think Jake actually agreed with your point on that.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe. I don't know. But anyway, it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with organizing ideologies. Religion is one type of organizing ideology. That's what I'm claiming.
Right. I just think it's a little ironic that you sit there in Austin, Texas, inside of the United States, which is I mean, albeit it was built on Protestantism, which is like a
No, it was built on the Enlightenment, not a Protestant. It was built on the Enlightenment.
Right.
Read your
The
founding fathers. They weren't necessarily
yeah.
very Christian or Christian at all.
Well, that's a good point, but what were the majority of Americans?
It doesn't matter. Our Constitution is an Enlightenment document.
It completely matters.
Our Constitution is an Enlightenment document. That's our organizing principle in the United States. Christianity is not the organizing principle. If it was, we'd have had the United States in 1100 under the Catholic Church, but we never got it.
It completely matters what the majority of the people of a country believe. It completely matters. Like, what if they believed in something completely different?
They do in India, and they still have a democracy. India has a democracy.
It's a different country.
And it's based on Enlightenment
has a
principles.
Culture and a different people.
Okay.
It's
just
different.
Can I ask for clarity between both of you? So it doesn't seem like we're talking about the existence of a God,
no, not at all.
But we're talking about whether or not countries are formed under certain religions, and whether or not that's a good thing based off of what happens after the fact to point back to, because it feels like we have a lot of fallacious reasoning, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to say post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? This happened, therefore this is the cause. We also don't want to misattribute. I'm sorry, but I'm listening and I'm just like all of these red flags. It's like fireworks in my head. I'm just like, no, hold on. I want to throw a flag on the field.
All right, flag on the field. Jake, we just got a flag thrown on us.
Yeah. I would love to see this conversation played out, because holy crap. But we were going somewhere. We were going somewhere. And do
you remember where we were before? If you want to go back to a point.
Yeah. Jake, you are a good caller, man.
Thanks.
I really like this. You two.
About the truth.
Oh my gosh. I would start a separate podcast just to hear you two. Okay. So we were talking, we agreed that religiosity, the religiosity of a country or the success or founding of a country does not necessarily lead to whether or not that God exists. And we were moving into why you think a God exists. And you were starting to lead into, and I think what led into this was you're talking about the founding of this country. But I would think that it would still follow from the thing we already agreed on before, which is that does not necessarily mean that a God exists. We're talking about whether or not something is good, for society or humanity. But I'm having trouble following, so I might have gotten you wrong. Could you clarify for me, Jake?
Yeah, I think I was talking about how I was atheist before, and you were saying that you might have thought that I thought you guys were the type of atheists that still believe in like crystal balls and fortune telling, and then I clarified that.
You're right. You're right. You were telling your own story. Yeah. You said that you were an atheist. And I think you were starting to say that you were a skeptic, possibly?
Right.
Okay. So what moved you into your religious viewpoint from being a skeptic atheist?
Well, I moved there from being like a theist or an agnostic for a few years, because some people made some very good arguments. I kept wondering, like, there has feeling like the need, like there has to be more to this world than just material things. Like,
why?
I kept wondering, what is the difference? Like, when we think about robots, we think about like they could become almost human-like, except the slight difference is that I'm just a biological being with electrical impulses going through my brain.
Oh, free will.
So I'm kind of like the exact same thing as a robot, except I am inside my body. You know what I'm talking about? Like
I totally do. Can I relate with you on something?
It's not
here.
Can I finish my point?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. So I'm not just a series of programs going through something. It's like I am living through this physical, material organism on the earth, and I'm experiencing things through it. And it's different from a robot because it's kind of like there's nothing inside the robot that's experiencing the world. It's just kind of processing and producing output, but it doesn't have a spirit. And there's no other word besides spirit that really captures what I'm trying to say.
Jake?
So that's the end of my point.
I love it because we've moved through several different arguments, and I wish I can use this as a teaching moment and just go through this. Can you email me, Eric, at atheist-community.org? There are so many teachable moments. You're bringing up the existence of the qualia argument. Oh, mail at talkheathen.com. That works as well, absolutely. And anybody else wants to email it, mail at talkheathen.com. But when you're talking about qualia and things like that, I guess where I connect with you is when it comes to morality and ethics, right? We see that we are moral and ethical creatures. And so I came to the conclusion that there just wasn't sufficient evidence that a God existed. And then I needed to actually start unpacking everything that I had tied along with my religiosity, including why I thought we were moral creatures. And so I'm looking around and I'm thinking, okay, so if it's not because of a God, why are we moral? Why are we like this? And I can't help but think of, early scientists and current scientists. You see these different things acting in the world, right? You see gravity, but that doesn't mean you know why it does that. And so we have to investigate it. And so I feel like I'm coming at this from a... Go ahead.
I was going off topic, but I was thinking how we used to think that gravity is just coming from a center of mass, but actually we've recently found out that you could produce waves of gravity and that it could actually be manipulated in like the last 5 years.
I am really...
Well, you'd have to have a black hole to help manipulate you because the waves are so tiny it wouldn't matter. But I wanted to go back to the morality thing. I'm amazed and quite interested in the bonobos' morality. They have morality that's even better than ours, I think.
Right.
So other animals,
point,
and
like,
you look at the dolphins, they have great morality than compared to us sometimes.
They could be rapists.
Well, I wouldn't.
Yeah, they can't. Yeah, but bonobos aren't rapists.
Underwater cave gang rape to be
Jake,
morality.
Right? Okay. We need to do this more often. We're all getting in touch and we're talking, and this is going to be great. I'm going to record it. It's going to be fantastic. I do have a hard stop coming up though, and I want to make sure that I get through a couple calls. I'm going to be in Kentucky next weekend at the Ark Encounter protest, so I won't be here on Talk Heathen next weekend. But if you want to talk to Jamie next weekend, or if you want to call in the weekend after that, I'd love to pick one of these many places and see what happens when we keep pulling the string and whether or not we unravel the sweater. Does that sound okay?
All right.
Thanks for calling in.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for taking my call. All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.